four-bagger. Here for Dayton Webber.
In for a 6.
And it is good right down the middle. And the crowd loves it here in Milwaukee.
Quadruple amputee cornhole champion now facing murder charges for allegedly shooting and killing someone in his vehicle.
Pull him out. Help me get him out of the car. That was the chilling request made to 2 passengers in the back of a moving vehicle on the night of March 22nd. Moments before, a heated argument had ended in a flash of gunfire. But as the witnesses scrambled out of the car, terrified, the driver didn't stay to explain. He hit the accelerator, disappearing into the Maryland night with a dying man still in the passenger seat. 2 hours later, a body is found in a stranger's yard 15 miles away. The suspect? He's already 150 miles across state lines, seeking refuge in a Virginia hospital. But here's the part that has investigators and the world completely stunned. The man they're hunting has no arms and no legs. How does a quadruple amputee commit a high-speed, mid-drive execution and vanish? Welcome to Dark Minds. Tonight, we're untangling a case that defies every physical logic we know. Before we dive into the impossible mechanics of this crime, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into the shadows. And do me a favor, drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from tonight. It was 10:25 p.m. on a Sunday night that should have been silent, the kind of stillness you only find in the rural stretches of Charles County, Maryland. But that silence was shattered at the intersection of La Plata Road and Radio Station Road. 2 figures, breathless and trembling, stumbled into the glare of a patrol car's headlights. They weren't just waving for help, they were flagging down a nightmare. To the officers who rolled down their windows, the terror on their faces told a story before they even opened their mouths. They had just escaped a rolling metal tomb. The story they told began miles back, inside the intimate, cramped confines of a vehicle. It was a car full of friends, or at least people who knew each other well enough to share a ride through the dark. At the wheel was 27-year-old Dayton James Webber. Beside him, in the front passenger seat, sat Bradrick Michael Wells. As the car ate up the asphalt of the Maryland backroads, the atmosphere inside began to sour. It started with a disagreement, a spark of friction that in any other car might have ended with a slammed door or a period of cold silence. But as they neared the intersection of Radio Station Road, the tension escalated into a heated dispute. Voices rose, filling the cabin, drowning out the hum of the tires. Then, the unthinkable happened. In a move that defies every physical expectation we have of a quadruple amputee, Webber allegedly produced a firearm. There was no pause to pull over, no moment to de-escalate. While the vehicle was still in motion, a heavy piece of machinery hurtling down a dark road, a shot rang out. In the confined space of the SUV, the sound must have been deafening, the muzzle flash blinding. Bradrick Wells, caught in the crossfire of a verbal war turned deadly, was struck. The car didn't screech to a halt immediately. It kept rolling, a ghost ship piloted by a man who had just crossed a line from which there is no return. Finally, Webber steered the vehicle toward the shoulder near Llano Drive. The engine idled, the interior lights perhaps flickering on, illuminating a scene of absolute horror. With the cold, detached pragmatism of a man who had already processed the finality of the act, Webber turned to the 2 passengers in the back seat. He didn't offer an excuse. He didn't beg for their silence. Instead, he made a request that would haunt their sleep for years to come. "Help me," he reportedly said. "Help me pull him out." He wanted them to help him discard the weight of his actions onto the side of the road like roadkill. He wanted them to be accomplices in the erasure of Bradrick Wells. But the witnesses didn't stay. Terrified that the barrel of that gun might turn toward the back seat next, they scrambled out of the doors and vanished into the darkness of Llano Drive, running until they found the flashing lights of the La Plata police. Left alone with the consequences of the last 10 minutes, Dayton Webber didn't wait for the sirens. He shifted the car back into gear. With the body of his friend still slumped in the seat beside him, he pressed the accelerator and disappeared into the night, beginning a 150-mile journey that would turn a local tragedy into a national mystery. 2 hours. In the grand arc of a human life, 2 hours is nothing. A movie, a long dinner, a stretch of highway. But between 10:25 p.m. and 12:20 a.m. that night, those 2 hours were a hollow, silent void where the passenger seat of a Tesla SUV became a moving vigil. While the witnesses were at the La Plata police station, breathless and shaking as they poured out their story to disbelieving officers, the car was still moving. Dayton Webber wasn't just driving, he was navigating a 15-mile stretch of Maryland backroads with the weight of a life ended sitting inches away from him. He bypassed the main arteries, avoiding the well-lit gas stations and the late-night traffic of Highway 301, steering instead toward the isolation of Charlotte Hall. The 10,000 block of Newport Church Road is a place defined by its quietude. It's a stretch of residential land where the trees grow thick and the houses sit back from the asphalt, shielded by the dark. At approximately 12:20 a.m., the peace of that neighborhood was severed by the sound of a car slowing down, not pulling into a driveway, but idling just long enough for a heavy, final task to be completed. Imagine the scene for the resident who lived there. A typical Monday morning was just beginning in the darkness. Perhaps they were let out a dog, or maybe they just happened to glance toward the edge of their property. What they found wasn't just a shadow in the grass, it was a man. Bradrick Michael Wells, a 27-year-old from Waldorf, lay still in a stranger's yard. He was no longer a passenger, no longer a friend, and no longer the man who had been arguing over a grievance just 2 hours prior. He was now a piece of evidence in a crime that defied the physical laws of nature. By the time the first 911 call was placed and the sirens began to wail through the trees of Charlotte Hall, the car that brought him there was already long gone, ghosting toward the Virginia border. When the blue and red lights finally illuminated Newport Church Road, the gravity of the situation fell into the lap of Detective R. Johnson. A veteran of the Charles County Sheriff's Office, Johnson stepped into a crime scene that felt incomplete. There were no shelling casings in the grass. There were no signs of a struggle in the dirt. This wasn't where the violence happened. This was merely where it was discarded. As Johnson and his team worked the scene under the harsh glow of portable floodlights, the narrative began to tighten. This wasn't a random act of highway madness or a carjacking gone wrong. Through the identification of the victim and the statements flowing in from La Plata, a devastating reality emerged. This was an inside job. Bradrick Wells wasn't a stranger to the man who allegedly pulled the trigger. Detective Johnson confirmed that all 4 people in that car, the 2 who ran, the 1 who died, and the 1 who drove, were acquaintances. They were friends. They had history. They had a shared life that had somehow curdled into a singular violent moment in the dark. As the sun began to threaten the horizon on Monday morning, the investigation moved from the grass of Newport Church Road to the digital world. The search was on for a modified SUV and a man whose face was known to millions as a symbol of triumph over tragedy. But for Detective Johnson, the miracle was gone. In its place was a fugitive, a 150-mile trail of breadcrumbs, and a grieving family in Waldorf demanding to know how a night out with friends ended in a lonely yard in Charlotte Hall. To understand the shockwaves rippling through Maryland and the sports world today, you have to understand the man behind the wheel. You have to understand that for 27 years, Dayton James Webber was a walking, breathing miracle. His story didn't start in a dark car on a rural road. It started in a hospital bed when he was only 10 months old. A lethal strep A bacterial infection tore through his tiny body with such ferocity that doctors were forced into a devastating choice: his limbs or his life. They gave him a 3% chance of survival. 3%. He was a child who was supposed to be a memory before he could even speak. But Dayton Webber didn't just survive, he conquered.
He grew up in a world not built for him and decided he would navigate it anyway. By the time he reached adulthood, he wasn't just a survivor, he was a celebrity. He became the face of the No Excuses movement, the first quadruple amputee to reach the professional ranks of the American Cornhole League. If you turned on ESPN on a Saturday afternoon, you might have seen him, calm, focused, tossing bags with a precision that able-bodied players envied. He was a hero in the ACL, a man who proved that the human spirit has no boundaries. In a 2023 essay for the Today Show, Dayton bared his soul to the world. He wrote about the stairs, the struggle, and the ultimate triumph of proving everyone wrong. He was the inspiration. He was the warrior. That essay was a testament to a life lived in the light, which makes the current allegations feel like a solar eclipse. How does the man who wrote about the sanctity of a second chance at life allegedly become the person who snuffs one out in the passenger seat of a car? But as the headlines transitioned from inspiration to murder suspect, one question began to drown out all others. One question that social media sleuths and news anchors alike couldn't stop asking. How?
How does a man with no hands and no feet operate a heavy firearm? How does he maintain control of a vehicle while allegedly discharging a weapon at a passenger sitting inches away? The answer, it seems, lies in a combination of modern technology and a lifetime of extreme adaptation. The vehicle in question wasn't just any car, it was a Tesla SUV. In the world of automotive tech, Tesla is the gold standard for accessibility. Between its sophisticated autopilot features and the ease with which its digital systems can be modified for custom limb-based controls, the car wasn't a barrier for Dayton, it was an extension of him. For years, he had been navigating the world in high-tech machinery, proving he didn't need feet to go 70 miles per hour. And then there is the dexterity. While the public saw a man who had lost his limbs, those who watched him closely saw a man who had mastered what remained. As Charles County Sheriff spokesperson Diane Richardson pointedly noted to the press, his abilities and capabilities are well documented on the internet. You only have to look at the footage of him on the cornhole court, the way he grips, the way he aims, the way he executes a release with surgical accuracy. To the investigators, Dayton Webber wasn't a man defined by what he lacked. He was a man defined by what he could do. And on that Sunday night, the police believe he used those hard-won skills, the same skills that made the world cheer for him on national television, to do the unthinkable. The miracle of his survival has now been overshadowed by the mechanics of a crime, leaving us to wonder, at what point did the inspiration turn into an apex of darkness? While the residents of Charlotte Hall were waking up to the sight of yellow crime scene tape on Newport Church Road, the man they were looking for had already crossed the Potomac. Dayton Webber wasn't just driving, he was fleeing with a calculated, desperate momentum. He had put 150 miles between himself and the scene of the crime, crossing the state line into Virginia and pushing deep into the heart of Albemarle County. But as the clock ticked toward 1:27 a.m. on Monday, March 23rd, the digital net was already tightening. Police across 2 states were now looking for a very specific vehicle and a very specific driver. The break in the case didn't come from a high-speed chase or a dramatic standoff. It came from a vigilant Albemarle County police officer who spotted Webber's vehicle idling at a local gas station. In the quiet hours of the early morning, the car stood out like a beacon. By the time investigators reviewed the station's security footage, they had what they needed, visual confirmation of the suspect. But Webber was no longer at the pump. He had moved on to a location that no one expected for a man on the run, a hospital. At the Centara Martha Jefferson Emergency Department on Prophet Road in Charlottesville, the miracle on the court was seeking help once again. But this time, it wasn't for the trauma of his past. He was reportedly seeking treatment for an unrelated medical issue. It is one of the strangest details of this entire saga that in the middle of a multi-state murder investigation, the suspect walked into a brightly lit medical facility and checked himself in. The police didn't storm the ER, they waited. With the cooperation of the hospital staff and the oversight of the Albemarle County Police Department, they maintained a perimeter, watching the exits, waiting for the moment he was medically cleared.
For those few hours, Dayton Webber was perhaps the most watched man in Virginia, resting in a hospital bed while the charges of first and second-degree murder were being finalized in a Maryland courthouse. The moment he was released, the inspiration officially became a prisoner. Officers from the ACPD took him into custody without incident, charging him as a fugitive from justice. As of today, March 24, 2026, Dayton Webber sits in the Albemarle County Regional Jail. He is no longer the athlete on the ESPN screen. He is a man in a jumpsuit awaiting extradition. The 150-mile flight has ended in a jail cell, but the legal battle is just beginning. Back in Charlotte County, Detective Rod Johnson and his team are preparing for his return, ready to bring the man who beat a 3% survival chance face to face with a justice system that doesn't believe in miracles. As the sun rises on March 24, 2026, the shockwaves from the Newport Church Road discovery have traveled far beyond the borders of Charlotte County. The man who once stood as a beacon of what is possible has left a community and an entire sport grappling with a reality that feels impossible. The American Cornhole League, the very organization that helped launch Dayton Webber into the national spotlight, has officially broken its silence. In a statement released just hours ago, the ACL acknowledged the extremely serious nature of the allegations. Their words were measured, careful to respect the judicial process, but the undercurrent was clear. The league is distancing itself from its former star. They've noted that Webber hasn't been an active participant since late 2024, but the images of him competing under their banner on ESPN still haunt the headlines. For the ACL, and for the fans who cheered him on, the miracle has been replaced by a tragedy that has no highlights. But while the sports world reels, a family in Waldorf is living through a silence that will never be filled. Bradrick Michael Wells was 27 years old. He was a son, a friend, and, crucially, an acquaintance of the man now accused of taking his life. In the quiet corners of Waldorf, the question isn't how a quadruple amputee could pull a trigger, it's why a friend would ever want to. The argument that began in that Tesla SUV remains a black box, a secret shared only by the witnesses who fled and the man now sitting in a Virginia jail cell. The legal machinery is now grinding into gear. Detective Rod Johnson and the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office are moving forward with the extradition process. Within days, Dayton Webber will likely be transported from the Albemarle County Regional Jail back to Maryland soil. He won't be returning to a hero's welcome. He will be walking into a courtroom to face the weight of first and second-degree murder and the testimony of the two people who watched him drive away into the night. This case has challenged our perceptions of capability, disability, and the darkness that can hide behind even the most inspirational stories. As the Dark Minds investigation into this case continues, we are left with the chilling words of the sheriff's office. His abilities are well documented. It's a reminder that the human spirit is capable of incredible heights, but the human heart is capable of unfathomable depths. We will be here, watching the courthouse steps as this story moves from the asphalt of Radio Station Road to the finality of a verdict. This has been a Dark Minds Deep Dive. If you found this investigation compelling, make sure to subscribe so you can follow the trial and the technical evidence as it's released. What do you think was the true motive behind that final argument? Let us know your theories in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next chapter.